We have been utilizing these Google Form questionnaires as an additional opportunity to for you to provide comments and feedback on the items we discuss in these meetings. This is today's Google Form questionnaire link, which I will also be putting in the chat box. All questions are optional, so you can choose what you want to provide input on, and then we do post the responses on our 5MP concepts page anonymously. Please respond to that by August 25th. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to Natalie.
Thanks, McKenna. So like I said, this is a meeting of the Fifth Management Plan's agricultural subgroup. We are really excited to be meeting today because this really is kind of a culmination of a lot of the work that we've done over the last 2 years to prepare to get to this point. So it's been a long road, and we're excited to share some of this draft legal language with you all today. If you could go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk through some of that draft legal language. We'll also cover some of the details for providing suggested edits or comments through that questionnaire that McKenna mentioned. And that's the entirety of our agenda today. We do have significant time set aside in this meeting to allow for questions and comments, the last meeting we had like this, our municipal meeting, went pretty quickly because we don't think that there's anything that's surprising here. We've worked pretty hard to try to be faithful to the discussions that we had in our previous meetings. So I think what you'll see here in this draft language is really just a reflection of those previous meetings that we've had. Next slide, please. So many of you have seen this slide before. Before we get started, just want to reiterate our timeline. So we actually established our work group process in mid-2019 and have been working since then to develop these programs that we're going to be talking through the legal language of today. So right now, my team is working to draft the fifth management plans, including this regulatory language, including some narrative, providing some background information and kind of more plain language descriptions of these programs. And we intend to publish those full initial drafts early next year. So what that means is our timeline is really short at this point. So the language we have here, we're looking for feedback in a pretty quick amount of time, and we are working pretty intensively at this point on finalizing that drafting process. When we publish those initial drafts, we will be taking comments and feedback on those full initial drafts for each AMA. We'll present to the GUACs and we'll allow for additional public comment on those initial drafts. We will then edit and update those drafts according to those comments. And after that kind of initial editing step, we'll work toward beginning the promulgation process or the legal adoption process for those fifth management plans, which includes a hearing and an additional formal public comment period during which we take both verbal and written comments. So the point that I'm kind of trying to make here is that even though we're kind of getting to the end of this work group process, drafting process, there's still a lot of opportunity to provide feedback and comments on both the regulatory language that we're talking about today and those full drafts of the management plans that we'll be publishing early next year. Next slide, please. Did it go? Okay. I don't know if it's just my computer is still on the 5M timeline, but so for this meeting, we're going to be running through the various sections of the legal language in kind of a systematic way. So what, when I hand things off to Amanda in just a moment here, what we'll be doing is summarizing the changes between the 3rd, 4th, and 5th management plans, and then kind of providing an overview of that draft regulatory language. We are only going to be focusing today on the pieces of that language that have changed, but the full draft of that regulatory language, including the pieces that are the same between those plans, that is all available on our website. We are looking for questions, comments today. We're looking for input on both the structure of that language and the clarity of it, whether there's any edits or clarifications that we can either make through this meeting or even within that language. So we really look forward to hearing from all of you, and again, we're really excited to have gotten to this point in the process. So with that, if we could go to the next slide, please. I will go ahead and hand things off to Amanda to walk through that regulatory language. Amanda?
Thanks, Natalie. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to walk through the changes to the regulatory language. As Natalie mentioned, for those of you who have been following along in the subgroup process, none of this should be all too surprising. We've discussed these concepts throughout the subgroup process and then on our concepts page as well. The slides will follow the same general structure. First, there'll be a comparison table showing how the concept has changed from the 3rd to 4th to the proposed 5th. And then where it's applicable, there'll be a slide showing the actual regulatory language where we will pause for questions and comments. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the regulatory language that was posted 2 weeks ago. And if you have not, you can review it here in this meeting, or as always, we'll take comments after the meeting, and I'll talk more about how you can do that at the end of the meeting. So since we are touching on each of the agricultural conservation programs in this meeting, we thought we would just briefly mention the historic cropping program, even though there has been no change to the regulatory language. So this is the first alternative program to the base program, and it is required by statute, but there are no participants in any AMA. So it was initially created in the 3rd management plan and has been carried over to the 4th and 5th without any changes. The feedback that we've gotten on this is related to why we actually have this program and if it could be removed since there are no participants. The historic cropping program, as I mentioned, is required by statute, so it must be included. But as there are no participants and we had very little feedback, we have left this program unchanged in the 5th management plan. So the next is in the base program. This is actually in the statutory language, not in the legal language. However, we thought it was important to talk about. Under statute for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th management plan, the director may implement a reduction of the highest 25% of water duties within an area of similar farming condition. So this was not implemented in the 3rd management plan. In the 4th, a reduction of up to 10% was allowed by statute, and in the 5th, a reduction of up to 5% was allowed. And the details of those impacted under the statute would be published on a right-to-right basis in Supplement 1. So moving on to the Best Management Practices program. So there's 2 sets of slides for this program. The first is related to the individual BMPs, and the second are to the points targets. For the individual BMPs in the 3rd management plan, they were developed with assistance from the BMP Advisory Committee. In the 4th management plan, the Prescott and Tucson 4MPs were unchanged from the 3rd, but the Phoenix, Pinal, and Santa Cruz AMAs, there were some minor changes to some of the language to a couple of the BMPs, just for clarity, and then a couple of points changes to Category 1 and 2. For the 5th management plan, the BMP Advisory Committee was extended by executive order, and there were 5 meetings where each BMP was discussed in detail. As a result of these meetings, there were 9 new BMPs added and 12 BMPs that were updated. So I'm not going to go through all of these changes as we have spent some time with them already in the BMP advisory meetings. However, I did link the final red line version of the Appendix 4B on this slide, and it's also available on the BMP Advisory Committee website and also included in the full legal language document that was posted before this meeting. So for the BMP points targets, this table lists the points targets by category and management plan. For the Tucson and Prescott 4 MPs, they were unchanged from the 3 MPs points minimums and maximums. For the Phoenix, Pinal, and Santa Cruz 4 MPs, the maximum points were increased to 4 from 3, and the total points was changed from 10 to 12. For the 5 MPs, as was recommended by the BMP Advisory Committee, we updated all the minimum, maximum, and total points to be the same across all MAs. The maximum points in each category and total points were left unchanged at 4 and 12. However, the minimum points were adjusted slightly. Categories 3 and 4 were increased to 2. Category 1 was increased to 3, and Category 2 remained at 2 points. So this is the first legal language slide I'll show you today. It's a snapshot of the full legal language detailing the updated points targets. I won't read through it as I just summarized it in the last slide, but I'll go ahead and pause here to take questions. And then just as a quick reminder as well that all of this legal language was sent prior to the meeting, and we will be accepting feedback after the meeting as well. So you will have time to fully read this if you haven't already.
Okay. I'm not seeing any questions or comments at this time. So please do feel free to enter any questions or comments in the chat at any time. But I think at this point we'll go ahead and move on to the next item.
So moving on to the Integrated Farm Program. This is a new alternative conservation program for the 5th Management Plan. So this means all of the legal language is actually new. However, we're only going to show today the bits of the legal language that we have discussed throughout these meetings. So the geographic eligibility requirements, the cut to the aquifer, the flex accounts, and then also leaving the program. As I said, the rest of the legal language of this program is also new, but it's related to some of the administrative details like the application. So we're not going to include all of that language in this presentation, but again, the full text is available for your review and comment. So on this slide, first is the geographic eligibility requirement. The owner or operator may combine allotments of enrolled IGFRs and apply that water to anywhere within the footprint of the IGFRs if they are in the same irrigation district. And if they are not in an irrigation district, they can combine at the sub-basin level. And this is the legal language for that. And I'll go ahead and pause here again for questions.
We do have one question in the chat from Anthony Beckham. It says, has there been any thought on allowing a similar program for type 1 GFRs in the industrial program? It's a good question, Anthony. We had not discussed that at this point, but perhaps that's something we could look into for future management plans or conservation program.
All right, if there's not any more questions and comments on that one, I'll move on to the next item, which is the cut to the aquifer. So under the integrated farm program, the allotment will be a sum of the individual IGR allotments, which is established the same way as it is in the base program. The total combined allotment would have a cut to the aquifer. We have heard in previous meetings that the previous cut to the aquifer number was too high and might discourage enrollment. So that number has been adjusted to 5%. And again, here is the legal language and the section number for that, and then I'll pause again here for questions and comments.
Good. We have another question in the chat from Mike Caparosa. Is ADWR concerned that the IFP will limit participation due to the cut to the aquifer requirements?
Thanks, Mike, for that question. So the integrated farm program is an alternative conservation program, so folks don't have to participate in it, it's an option. And as well, we've heard that the 5% is a reasonable number. We've heard feedback on that and that people would participate with that percent cut.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no more questions or comments, we'll move on to the flexibility account. So for this one, the existing flex accounts of the IGRs that are enrolled in the program would be frozen as they are in the BMP program. And instead, a new flex account would be created for the new integrated farm unit, and that account would start at 0. So this account would be limited to positive and negative 50% of the total new allotment. And then upon leaving the program, the integrated farm unit's flex account will be divided proportionally by watered acre duties. So the proportional amount then would be added to the IGFR's existing frozen account when they leave the program. And here is the legal language for that, and this is part of the reason why you want to have summary slides, because this one's a pretty long one. But again, the full legal language is available for your review. I'll stop here again for questions.
Something else you can note, that legal language, I did drop the link to that legal language in the chat so you can review that and provide comments through the questionnaire. The reason we wanted to put this full language up on the screen is because it is brand new, but we'd be happy to take any questions about the details here as well. All right, I'm not seeing any comments.
All right, so we'll move on to leaving the program. So we did get some feedback on at the last meeting that the leaving process, which originally was very similar to the BMP program, was a bit too restrictive. And given that the integrated farm program is an allotment-based program, not a practice-based program, staff agreed with you. So we have updated the language to allow for more flexibility to leave the program. So an IGFR can request to leave the program at any time, including when there is a new owner or there is a conveyance, and that should be within 30 days of the conveyance. However, when and if the request is approved, the IGFR would have to remain in the program until the next reporting year, so they couldn't just leave mid-year. And then this is the legal language for that, and then I'll go ahead and pause here again. So we're not seeing any other questions or comments, so I will move on.
Oh, Amanda, sorry, can you go back one slide, please? In some of the side conversations we've been having about this program, we did hear some feedback on this item that 30-day timeline after a conveyance might be a little bit tight. So we would be happy to, either today or in writing, take any additional comments on what that timeline what a reasonable timeline there might be. I think we could certainly consider adjusting that to something like 60 days or something like that. So we're definitely considering some additional adjustments to some of the specifics here.
Thanks, Natalie. And then I'll move on to the last piece, which is for the irrigation district requirements. So the intent of this language has not changed. However, the language itself did change quite a bit to provide some clarity. So we're just showing the legal language for this, and since it did change quite a bit, not the intent, but the language, we thought it's important to bring it up in this meeting. So the intent of this language was to ensure that the loss and unaccounted for water of the irrigation distribution system is less than 10% by whatever means the irrigation district chooses to use. Before, the language may have been interpreted as the canals could be lined, or you could do something else that causes 10% or less LNU. However, it was always intended to say that the irrigation district must have less than 10% LNU, and lining the canals was one way that they could do that. The rule was never intended to be an exemption for those that line their canals. The intent was to allow for an alternative to lining the canals. So this updated language just kind of closes that gap. And then I'll go ahead and pause for questions.
Good.
All right, so not seeing any questions or comments there. I'll move on to this last slide, which is how to submit feedback. So as we've mentioned before, the legal language is available on the 5MP meeting page. It's also available on the 5MP concepts page. It was in the email for this meeting, and it's also available on this slide. You can submit comments through our questionnaire and directly input your comments there. So within the questionnaire, you can download the legal language. And the legal language already has the track changes turned on. So you can go in here and write new comments in. And you can go ahead and save that and add the file to the questionnaire, or you can directly write your comments into the answer box if you wish. I know that adding the file requires you to have a Google account, so if you do have any issues with that, you can always email that to the management plan's email, which is on that list, or on this page here, and on the slide as well. I think that's it there. And so I'll pass it back to Natalie for closing the meeting.
All right, great. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So as I said at the beginning, this meeting today is really kind of the culmination of the meetings that we've had over the last 2 years. So we really do appreciate all of the feedback and the ideas and the participation we've had from the ag community throughout this process. That's been really critical in helping us develop these programs, this legal language, and getting to this stage in our process. So we are looking forward to completing those full drafts of the management plans for each AMA and publishing those early next year. As Amanda and McKenna have both mentioned, we would like feedback through that questionnaire or through email by the 25th of August so that we can complete that drafting over the next several months. And we'd love to hear from any of you who may have questions or feel like there may need to be any additional discussion here. I know we kind of ran through a lot of that really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and pause here for just one more moment if there's anything that we may have skipped over, if anyone has any other comments or questions.
Natalie, this is Scott Briggins.
Yes, Scott, go ahead.
Yes. Due to a little trouble getting on the site in time, I was going to bring this up during your discussion of BMPs, but fortunately you've given an opening here. So I had a discussion more through the auspices of the BMP subcommittee than anything else. We have been working for the last couple of months. There was a level of discussion that came back after the agreements and compromises that led to the best management practices program that you enumerated today concerning a particular misranking, let us say, that certain groups had not seen how it affected them. And because of that, the comments from them came after, unfortunately, came after there was a compromise on the whole program. There has been quite a bit of meetings with those groups. And indeed, there's also been meetings with the general agricultural participants and water users concerning this. And the desire that seems to have emerged from this is to attempt to, as quickly as possible, get a time scheduled so we can have a BMP committee meeting with the goal of analyzing a single substitute farming practice for category 2 that we could analyze at the BMP level and then submit that to the director and see if he agrees with that, and that it would be stuck in the 5th management plan here, you know, in the timelines that we need to do to get things finished.
Scott, this is Director Brzezinski. Be happy to help you as the chair of the committee have those discussions. If you are at a point where the discussions are complete and you have language, specific language and point values for those new proposed BMPs, we would be happy to post that on the department's website in advance of a BMP committee meeting. That might help facilitate the discussion around those points at that meeting and help us work together with you to identify a time when that meeting might take place. Certainly, I am open to additional BMPs that are reasonable, have a solid technical background to them, and hopefully that are supported by consensus by the Ag BMP committee, by the agricultural community in general, and other stakeholders, as we did with the entire BMP list as we went through that process through the committee. So does that work, Mr. Chairman?
Director Brzezinski, yes, it works very well. And I will make a commitment to the department that I will have the proposed language for a substitute BMP to you to post on the website by close of business on Friday this week.
And thanks, Scott, and bear with us. If we can't get it up on Friday, look for it on Monday. Not always sure how that works technically with my IT folks, but we'll do the best we can. But if we can't get it up by COB Friday, it will be up there on Monday.
And
Well,
we can
thank
make
you
sure
very
that
much for that. In what I suggested, I did the same thing. I'm hoping I can have it done by Thursday, but I was giving myself an extra day also.
we'll make sure that we send out an email with the location of that document once it's posted as well.
And I'll just also say, Mr. Chairman of the committee and the groups who have been working with you, I really appreciate the fact that this issue daylighted now rather than perhaps during the hearing for the adoption of the plan itself. This gives us time to work through this and make legitimate necessary changes. So hopefully the hearing process can go as smoothly as possible.
And thank you very much. There's been a lot of people that have been working on it, and I do believe that good, fair negotiations and discussions happen. I think we have a good product to offer to the department.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have to fix this there. Is there anything after this one? So as we've mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, and as Scott and the director kind of talked about just now, our timeline is short at this point, so we are looking forward to getting that additional feedback from you all and working very quickly at this point to finalize those drafts for publication early next year. We've made really good progress. We're really excited about some of the differences that you'll see for the 5th management plans, both obviously in these programs, but also in the structure of the documents themselves. We think we have a really good product there, so we're excited to share those all with you early next year. I think we do not at this point have Oh no, there's a turf meeting on there. Okay. We do have one additional fifth management plans meeting coming up next week, Tuesday. That's our turf subgroup. So we're looking forward to finalizing that program and wrapping up this work group process. So with that, we do, again, thank you so much for your time and participation throughout this entire process. This truly has been a collaborative thing and something that we couldn't have done without the participation of the stakeholders in the agricultural community. So we really appreciate all of the time. We recognize it was a lot of meetings and a lot of time. So we really appreciate all the time that was dedicated to this process. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all for your time today, and hopefully we'll be talking with you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.